Profile is made possible by grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Texas Committee for the Humanities.
It always is crazy for survivors to talk about surviving. There's something almost callous about it. I don't think success ever gave me as much pleasure as it gave most people. I'm not 100%
And I'm very sad
sure
about
I
that.
understand Hammett to this day.
Very sad.
He's a very
I
complicated
did finally
man.
take the Fifth Amendment. I tried not to take the Fifth Amendment.
The House Un-American
What I
Committee
said
had
was,
called me
I will
and I
talk
saw the
about
handwriting
myself.
on the wall. There was no...
My mother and I, I'm
There's no
sorry to
way
say,
out. I knew my
didn't
hand
get along.
annoyed me. I had
bad.
stopped writing.
And by the time
Decided
I
I was
realized
not going to
why,
be any good, and I wasn't
was
going to be
dead.
bad. I've long ago stopped thinking about what happiness is. Taken for granted that there was no arbitrary definition of it.
Miss Hellman, you've written many plays and you've won many awards for your plays. And yet, in An Unfinished Woman, you talk about the conflict that would cause you to work so hard in a world that is not your own, but that has been your life. If the theater has not been your home, what has been your home?
That's not a fair question. I don't mean you mean to be unfair, but I didn't intimate anything had been my home. I simply said the theater wasn't.
Have you felt more at home in writing the books that you've
Yes,
written?
I felt more at home in writing the books, but that doesn't mean I'm at home in them. I don't know what's at home in writing. All I meant was I was at home when I was writing the plays. What I meant by it was that I was not at home when the plays went into rehearsal and opened, and we went through all the business of opening or closing or failure or success.
In fact, Hammett said to you all the way back in 1937, I think, the truth is you don't like the theater except at the times when you're in a room by yourself putting the plays on paper.
Yes, exactly. I'd forgotten I'd written that, but that's absolutely true. That's when I like it. I also like, and still do like, certain aspects of it. I like to see prose work.
You took
and
certain...
I like certain instincts that I have about the theater that still work well.
You took pride, I remember, in discovering Patricia Neal when you were the director.
Yes, that's what I meant about instincts. When my instincts in the theater are working well, I like it.
Is it the working with that many people, the production, the money?
I really don't know what it is. I don't think I can put my hand on it because it has nothing to do with... I've liked a great many people in the theater, as I said, and still do like a great many people in the theater. It's probably that I'm not by nature a collaborator. It also was, in a much more conscious way, in a much more practical way, along about the time of Candide, which musical Leonard Bernstein and Richard Wilbur and I did, and which is not now a sort of cult show, as you know, and which was at the time it opened a large failure and began to be a failure in Boston. I began intensely to dislike the talk about money and how one couldn't afford to rehearse another week or two, and how
before
much money
going
had
to New
be
York,
raised, and what money one had to do to run. And I began to feel for the first time in the theater all the pressures that money could bring on work, and to resent the idea that 3 years of my life was, almost 3 years of my life was going down the drain for money, just because money couldn't be raised to practice more, to hold out longer. With my mother and my father and me, almost the same thing happened once again. We came in, the play opened in the newspaper strike, and the pressures of money and no advertising and no newspaper reviews closed the show. Maybe it would have closed anyway. Perfectly possible it would have. But I began to think, I just don't want to live this way, where so much work and so much time is now absolutely out of my hands and dependent upon X amount of money being raised or not raised. Or I don't want my life to go this way anymore.
You said you're hard on yourself. We've talked about that. You said you took your successes for granted and worried so much about the failures. But don't the best people always run scared?
No, forgive me, I don't think I said I took them for granted, did I?
I have that quote.
Have you?
Yes.
Oh, goodness. Maybe I better stop writing. I think what I meant, I shouldn't have used the word granted. I think what I meant was they didn't bring me the pleasures that I think they should have brought me. Would be more accurate.
Do your successes
God
bring...
knows I didn't take them for granted because I never believed they were until I saw lines around the theater, and then it would take me weeks to believe they would continue. And I was a kind of joke in the theater that I never believed anything was successful even after it was.
Now when your books are successful, do you get the pleasure out of them that you think is right?
I get more pleasure. Yes.
You once said...
I'm not sure I'm geared to get pleasure from... I think my pleasures come from doing the work.
Do you like the process of writing? Do you like sitting down in the solitude of a room and writing?
Sometimes I hate it like everybody else, but most of the time I feel excited by it and pleased by it. Not always, God knows, but sometimes I'm semi-hysterical and sometimes tearful and sometimes depressed and think I've never written a word before and I'm the clumsiest ox that ever lived and all those things that everybody thinks. But I'm not sure what success is anyway. If it means money, I enjoy the money. If it means fame, it's very nice to about head waiters and.
You said I like fame, but I don't like and I'm no good at its requirements.
No,
Or
I'm
maybe vanity
awkward.
of any other kind.
I'm very awkward with them when people pay compliments. I really mean to be pleasant, and I'm either so over pleasant that I scare them, or I snap in some form. The one kind of compliment I remember with the very greatest pleasure that I ever had about a compliment was last year in San Francisco, just this week. My editor and I were walking on the street to an eye doctor where I was going, and a very pretty young woman passed us. I noticed her because she was so pretty. And then I was tapped on the arm, and it was she who turned back to tap me, and she was carrying a very modest little package of flowers in a paper. And she said, "I'd like to give you these. Goodbye," and walked on. And I thought, this is the nicest, this is the pleasantest compliment I've ever had in my whole life. This woman doesn't want to show off, doesn't want me to know a name, doesn't want to tell me anything, just wants to say it her way and get off. It was very moving to me.
Do you find fame intrusive? Does it bother you, other than with head waiters, I mean?
No, I don't find it intrusive.
Does it bother
Wish it
you
would
when...
intrude a little more.
Well, does it bother you when people come up and say to you, you're Lillian Hellman? I mean, you know you're Lillian Hellman.
It only bothers me, I like it very much. Some people pick very odd times. One person picked the middle of Madison Avenue traffic about 3 months ago, right smack in the middle. The light changed while she was telling me. And people were honking at us, and I thought, you know, one of us is crazy.
Of course, you did a good deal of writing in Hollywood. Is Hollywood the bad place for writers that it's often made out to be?
I don't think I can answer that question. It depends on who you are and what you're after. It wasn't a bad place for me, I have to say. But I had been lucky enough, by chance had been married to a man who went to, and I went to Hollywood with him long before I wrote anything.
That was Arthur Kober.
Arthur Kober. And I had a $50 a week job reading scripts at Metro Goldwyn Mayer. So I saw Hollywood long before I was ever offered a decent job, which only came after the Children's Hour was a success. So I was prepared, really, for Hollywood and knew I didn't want to live there, really. But I like movies very much, and I still like movies very much. I'm still very interested in them. I was very interested in them then, and didn't do what the rest of my generation did, which was to think of it as whoring. I genuinely was interested in doing pictures. So when it came time to, after Children's Hour was a success and I began to get large offers, I was protected by my earlier knowledge of Hollywood. I knew I didn't want to live there, but I knew that to some extent to write a script one had to go there. So I made a contract which allowed me, if it went over 10 weeks, I didn't stay in Hollywood. I came back to wherever I wanted to go and then brought the script back again. So there was never a time when I was tempted to live in Los Angeles. My temptations are not swimming pools and cars, is really what I'm saying. If they are, then I think it's dangerous for the writer, yes.
You think writers could be very spoiled by what Los Angeles can represent?
Could be, yes. Particularly for a young writer and for an older writer, the two classes, I think, could be spoiled. Luxury is a lovely thing, and I'm not denying it to anybody, and I wanted it as much as other people wanted it. I didn't happen to want that particular kind of luxury. I wanted other kinds of luxury.
You've presented an extraordinary picture of Hollywood in the 30s. You had some very unhappy times there, and I remember your stories about driving home and how you hated the drive home. And then you present other pictures of going to the wealthy homes and the sorts of parties they had. Are your memories of that time more painful or more happy?
Well, there were two periods. You see, there was a period when I was married and working at Metro, and those aren't particularly pleasant memories because working for $50 a week based on the fact you were only paid $50 a week if you could read 2 languages. You were paid $60 a week if you could read 3. And you sat you had no office of your own. You sat with about 15 or other 18 people in a large room. And you were required to read, unless you came across something very remarkable, 2 and 3 manuscripts a day. This is slave labor, real slave labor. And it takes you an hour to drive there and an hour to drive home at night. That was not a pleasant life.
You said it was in Hollywood that you learned to drink. Was that the period?
Yes.
And it stayed with you
I had drunk a little bit here, but not very much.
You said you wanted to write for movies. How did you react to seeing yourself portrayed in Julia by Jane Fonda?
I don't think that's the way I can answer the question. This sounds so simple-minded that I don't expect anybody to believe me. When I sold Julia, long before Jane Fonda was in the picture, it literally never occurred to me that my name was going to be used. I don't expect anybody to believe me, but it's the truth. When I read the script, and there I was, I called up my agent and said, hey, let's get this out right away. What kind of business is this? And there was no, he said, I don't know what you're talking about. What are you talking about? What do you think they bought it for? What? There's nothing in the contract that says this. Why did you think of it now? And I realized right in the middle of the conversation that, well, I don't know what word there is for that kind of lack of intelligence or blindness. So I stopped. I mean, there it was. There was nothing to be done about it. To come to your question, I was less, when I first saw a shot of the picture, less worried about Jane's picture of me, portrait of me, than I was about the total picture. The director and I had some arguments about the picture. Weren't pleased with each other, to say the least. And I was much more worried about the picture than I was. I quickly forgot that it was me, is what I'm saying. I was worried about, I liked Jane very much, of course. It was a very good performance. It's a very good movie, I think, in general. I have reservations about it, as anybody would have who, one doesn't like one's work touched, really, altered in any form.
I've rarely seen a movie that seemed to follow quite so closely.
There were more alterations than you're conscious of. For example, there was a giant alteration at the end of the picture. We mustn't talk about this as if it's Hamlet and everybody knows the plot of Julia. You remember as what really happened was that I went to England to get a lady who was already dead, but who had previously told me that she had a child, and the child was in Alsace. Had never told me the name of where the child was. I mean, with whom the child was boarding. She was, of course, too frightened to take the child with her on these very dangerous trips she was making, so she had boarded the child out. This was the, I think, wonderful scene of the movie in the Berlin restaurant, where she tells me that she's had the child.
Who was called Lily.
Who was called Lily. And then I go to get the body, and the truth was that I did not try to find the child. I was in a totally stunned state. And I have no reason for it except the stunnedness of what was happening. I was in a sort of semi-coma, and I had no way of finding out anyway. I didn't know anybody to go to. Rationally, I couldn't have figured out where to go to in Alsace. But even if I had known, I think I was in too stunned a state. I returned to America with the body without looking for the child. The picture, on the other hand, has me looking for the child immediately. I did not like this because it was not the truth. And I didn't want to be that kind of heroine. And I suffered terribly for not looking for the child. And
You did have word about that, though, didn't you? You write in your new notes to Julia that you had word about what happened to the child.
I had gone to the funeral parlor for Julia and been told by the funeral parlor man that the death certificate had been signed by Dr. Smith, let us say, at such and such an address, and then delivered. He had called for it there. He, the funeral director, had called for it there. I went to Dr. Smith at such and such an address, and there was no Dr. Smith. And I thought there was no address, such address. I couldn't find the house in my memory. I couldn't find any name or address for the man who sent me the cablegram, who signed his name James Watson. He was not listed in the London telephone book. And the funeral director said he didn't know his name. So I literally knew nothing. Hammett had always said, when I got in my most nightmarish nights about what happened to the child, "You are being very foolish to do this." She would never have left a child without leaving the name and address with trusted people in Europe. The only reason she didn't tell you is you didn't live in Europe. She would not have left her child without leaving the whereabouts with trusted people. And I would say to that, well, where are the trusted people? They never told me anything about the child. Certainly they would let me know. And he would say, I have no answer for that, but it's ridiculous to think she would have not trusted. She trusted her life to these people. She must have trusted her child's life. Well, 2 years ago when I was in London, two and a half years ago, I had a telephone call from a doctor whose name I changed in the notes, so it doesn't matter what his name is on television either. Let us say it's Macintosh, which it wasn't. In a quite angry tone. I had a telephone call at the hotel. There'd been an interview with me in the Observer, and he said that he was the son of the doctor who had signed the death certificate. And why had I used the correct address to harm his father? That I must know that signing a false death certificate was a criminal act. Why had I done such a thing? And I said, I didn't do such a thing. I changed your father's name, and I changed the address. He said, you did not change the address. You did not change the address. And I have been very angry with you since the book came out. And I said, why don't you come and have tea with me, and we'll talk it over, because God knows I didn't mean to. Is your father living? He said, yes, my father is living. And I said, did I bring your father any harm? And he said, I don't wish to talk about it. And I asked him for tea, and we made a date for the next afternoon. He never showed up. He was also a doctor, he said. About 3 or 4 days later, I had another telephone call from him with no explanation of why he didn't show up. This time the tone was slightly different. It was still angry, but a different kind of angry. He said, I'm sitting next to my father, who's had a stroke. And he can't speak, but he can write a little. And he's writing a message for you now. It will take him a few minutes. Have you patience? I mean, in a very unpleasant voice. And I said, yes, I have patience. May I come around and see your father? He said, no, under no circumstances. And I said, I would like to change something I said the other day. I have cabled New York, and I do realize that I did not keep a diary of those days. And it is perfectly possible. I know I changed your father's name. He said, there's no doubt that you changed his name. I said, it is possible that the real address did stick in my mind, and I did use it in the book. It is perfectly possible. I meant to change it and didn't change it. And for that, I am deeply sorry. But you haven't told me if I brought him any harm by doing it. I had no answer to that. He said, my father is now ready. The message, in essence, said, I knew where Julia's baby was, as did James Watson, as did 3 other people. We all searched for the child. The child was living in a very small town with anti-fascist, anti-German fighters. A couple. The man was the mayor of the town. The man and his whole family were wiped out as the Germans walked through. There is no question the baby died with them. We went into it very carefully. I am sorry that all these years you didn't know it. He had read the story and realized that I didn't know it. We should have been in touch with you. We didn't realize that you didn't know it. Well, I think I was as happy as I've been in many years, I can tell you. This news. Terrible to be happy at the thought of a child's death, but the relief of not being guilty was very great. And the message was very friendly. Said, I'm sorry that I'm too ill to see you, and good luck, and thank you.
Next profile, Lillian Hellman talks about her years with the author Dashiell Hammett.
What do you think motivated him? To see you fulfill your potential, to make you...
He was very good to writers. I was not the only writer he helped. He was a very generous man to writers. In my case, there was a great deal at stake, a great deal of feeling at stake. I think he really wanted me to be some good. He was very pleased and proud when he thought I was.
Profile was made possible by grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Texas Committee for the Humanities.